Thank you. I think we made it. That means we're on, right?
Yeah, recording
Yay!
has started. We did it.
Fantastic. We are here. Hello, everyone out there in virtual land. Welcome to another podcast in Dolby Atmos. We are doing a conversation today with CJ Drumeller. Welcome, CJ. How's it going?
Thank you. Going great, going good.
Very
Got our
good.
afternoon coffee, coffee ready to
Exactly.
go.
Yeah, I think we were talking
Yeah.
about we're gonna retitle this in just a coffee chat with CJ Drumeller because we
Yeah.
both need it. You know, if you're out there. So cheers to everyone out there.
Cheers.
So kind of just starting off, we got like about an hour to catch up on all the many things, and I know nothing. So please treat me that way throughout this entire conversation. Just teach me as much as you can in an hour about Dolby Atmos. So first things first, before we even begin, I would love to talk about who the two of us are before we. So I'll start with myself. That's okay.
Yes, please.
Awesome, awesome. Hello everyone. My name is Ashton Carter. I am the director of production for Pod People. In case you don't know, Pod People is an organization. We basically we make podcasts for clients. We are full service production companies. In short, clients come to us and say, "Hey, we want to make a podcast," and we will offer anything from start to the finish, from ideation to distribution and staffing. And so, if you ever have any interest, podpeople.com, check us out. And then I'll turn it over to CJ. Tell us more about yourself.
Yeah, I'm CJ. I'm a longtime audio freelancer. Kind of got my hand in a little bit of everything. Started out in broadcast and TV, worked into film and immersive experiences, did some VR stuff, and now I'm kind of landing in my sweet spot, or what I like to think is my sweet spot, into immersive storytelling through podcasts.
Yes, and I've working in podcasting, it's so popular right now. Everyone's saying immersive, immersive. I think people really want to be taking on a ride when they press play on that podcast. And just noting that Dolby Atmos is now available in over 1.5 billion devices. Is that right? Like that can be on mobile, PC, living room, automotive. So anywhere you get audio, you can get a Dolby Atmos experience. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there's a wide range of new technology and old, but just more and more every day is more accessible. Everywhere you go, you can find this technology. It's great.
Right. So welcome to the future.
Yeah.
So I think one of the first things, because I am new to the Dolby Atmos, a lot of producers, a lot of editors I know are, learning a lot about it. So I'm curious to know with you, like, what was the first time you experienced Dolby Atmos? Was it in
Ooh.
a movie theater, music, gaming, TV? Like, what was your first
It
introduction to it?
definitely, I remember for sure when the new install started happening in theaters, we drove, an extra 30 minutes to go to this Dolby specific, the screen, the sound, and I can't even remember what movie it was. I think it might have been Star Wars or something. I don't know. So here's a saying is like you don't usually remember what people say, but how they make you feel.
Everyone's saying
So
that. I heard that recently.
yeah,
Yes.
so that was the walk away with the Atmos and just the possibility of 360 things can happen anywhere, and so that was my walk away. Most recently, too, this is super fun, is just an extra step of like accessibility. Now that I've got a home, Atmos, just a sound bar, I was playing Call of Duty through it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like
You're
if
in the
there was a
game.
God mode or whatever, playing this game, you hearing people run up from behind you, and so these ideas of like now that we have this accessibility and what we call the buzzword immersive, it's now starting to become the status quo, to
Mhm.
where like generations from now will be like stereo. Like I don't want to like
That's
what's what
flat.
why
Right. That's
why
pretty
is it
basic.
just stereo? Now, I
Yeah.
mean, there's different applications, and so that's kind of where it's at now, and it's just super exciting. I mean, it's a great time to be having this talk, and I'm just excited about, where it's popping up, the cars that have it,
Again,
the
because it's coming,
idea.
we're getting so much technology in our cars, like Apple, Android could be right attached to your car. So why would that not include audio? So that it makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. I can't wait to the future where I'm like feeling I'm driving through Call of Duty or, like, or Solar, which like, I'm like, like, and like nothing's happening, just in traffic.
Missile incoming, missile. But what's cool, and I had that same thought. I was like, oh man, is that even ethically okay? Like, I hope I don't make people wreck. but also immersive notifications to where, like, if there's a sound like a car that's coming, you have directionality through, and so it's all this tie back to where we're getting closer to what our, evolution, even as, as humans, was developed in our hearing, to where it started was, like we're in the forest, and we hear this, natural sound of birds and wind rustling through the trees. And what happens is we get so used to those sounds to where now when we hear something running through the forest towards us, our brain activates. We don't have to see it. We can just hear it. Our brain activates, says danger, danger, or something new. And so it activates our brain in a new way. So this new technology of being inside of this immersive sphere of sound has so many possibilities, not only with storytelling, but also attention, deficit, to where now we can activate your neurological system in a way that now we're getting messages across that might be phased out because it's always been the same. So that's kind of where it's like, man, the sky's the limit, or not even the sky. We can go to outer space.
Like the limit does not exist. It's like this new
Yeah,
thing
there's
I've
no
been
limit.
saying, right?
Yeah.
So, and talking, because we're going to get into a lot of how that works in podcasting in particular. So I think before we even dive all the way into podcasting itself, everyone on this call probably knows that there is a misconception about what a podcast is, right? So a podcast isn't simply a person interviewing another person. That would specifically be a chat show. So, but since you've been in podcast and audio space for so long, what other formats of podcast are there besides just your basic chat show, would you say?
Yeah, so this is actually a really interesting topic for me, coming from a film background and a TV background, to where, the story's all there and kind of on the screen. For me, it was a couple of years ago to where I kind of just decided that I'm going to move into podcasting. And from this, from this storytelling of film, TV, having all the actors doing stuff on screen or whatever, going to an audio only format, to where now it is what I feel like it is in this new type of podcast. It's not really new, it's old, but it's a newer, push for this,
Mm-hmm.
again, the buzzword immersive
Right.
storytelling. So instead of just maybe an interview or a talk show, there's now this whole series of shows called audio drama or scripted
Mm-hmm.
podcasts, which have full screenplay scripts that have been adapted for an audio only storytelling. And
So
so
my
for
ears
me,
only, my ears,
yeah,
like all,
ears
like don't
only,
get to see anything, but
right.
there's like actual stories being told. Okay. Okay. Keep
But
going.
the cool thing is, we say ears only, but what happens with that is the imagination is allowed to activate in a new way that not even a film can do. So when you're listening to a story, or it's the same like when you're reading a book, like Hogwarts might look different to you than to me until we saw the film, right? So now we know what it looks like because we saw it. But before that, we each had our own personalized picture of what that was. And that was caused through our imagination. So these stories that are audio driven now are what I call using, the art of suggestion. Or at my job as a sound designer, I work in suggestive things. So I give you a sound, and then I let you take that sound, and your brain paints that picture. So now the coolest thing about it, and the thing that I just love about it, is now it's not just me telling the story. Now it's all of us have a community of people, whoever's listening to the show, now are all contributing to what that show looks like, what that world looks like. And then now we've all kind of got a little bit of a stake in, like we're like, oh, now we can argue about, like, well, the walls were definitely green, like, or that definitely isn't what the character looks like, and so that's kind of where, like, I got immediately addicted to it, because it was just, I was realizing that through this storytelling, it's tapping into an imagination thing that we really need as a society, and especially
Mm-hmm.
with, like, generations to come. It's an exercise. That's why, people love playing D&D, because it's like an exercise in
And,
imagination,
and imagination, creativity. I say that all the
Yeah.
time. I feel like I love that you use Harry Potter, like Hogwarts, as a very good reference, because you're so right. When you just get a book, it's kind of like you can paint that picture however you want to. So with podcasting, it kind of elevates that. Like they could just say it, but again, with sound design and that immersive experience, you actually feel like you would be in the castles. Like you still don't know what the castle maybe looks like. That could be by the writing, but you really get to feel what the sounds of the castle would be like and things like
Yeah.
that. I wanted to take a moment to like kind of go a little bit more into just the scripted fiction, audio drama that you're talking about. So everyone out there watching, in case you don't know, DJ worked on a awesome, incredible podcast called Solar. It features some names you might know. We have Alan Cumming, Stephanie Beatrice, Helen Hunt, just to name small time folks that are on this wonderful podcast. So CJ, how does that show like that come together? Like what does, a team say, hey, we want to hire the best actors in town to make a fiction podcast? Like what is that process? Or any other clients as well?
Well, I think this is super fun to talk about, and I will have to say, give a shout out to my directors. I think they're here, probably Jenny and Chris. Chris Porter, they're somewhere in there. But so with the formation of the story, Chris wrote it, and they both co-directed, and with the awesome talent that you just listed, this world-class show, and just coming a part of that team and becoming a part of their vision for what they wanted the storytelling to be. This is a different. So when we say scripted podcast, it's very literally scripted, like the action scripted, the dialogue scripted. And what's really special about almost a whole different tier of scripted to where there's scripted with no narrator. So when you're in an audio only format, a lot of the times the challenge is how do we describe what's happening? And so how do we say, they walked across the room to get a cup of water? So the idea of doing that only with sounds created a special challenge for us. And I think all of the shows that I've done have been no narration, where it's all left up
Only
to
story.
sounds.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
sounds and story. Gotcha.
Yeah, so the writing is the first thing that happens, and having a mindset that has how are we going to say this and how are we going to do that. So a big part of even Solar was the creation of their atmosphere or the spaceship that they're on, because we don't say, okay, now we're going to the kitchen or now we're going to the loading bay. And the special challenge with trying to be careful about spoilers, but with this specific story is there's a pre-event and a post-event. So the things that happen before are a nice, calm, atmosphere, and then something happens and everything's messed up, but it still has to be in the same room. So the idea with what we ran with on this was really almost like a VR mindset at first, to where we measured the rooms. We said this room's going to be 13 foot by 8 foot, and so each room had a dimension, each room had a height, and each room kind of had a layout. So we were actually writing, kind of drawing maps of like where this stuff is, so that the listener, as soon as they hear somebody in that room, they'll immediately know, well, we're in capsule 1 or we're in capsule 2. So it was kind of a fun, idea of like, this is also, we're from the get-go, we're in, we're going to use a lot immersive storytelling, because we're trying to figure out ways to really represent. And what the great thing is, especially with the tools now, is I can actually put those parameters into, my session and say, this room is this big and it should sound this way. And so utilizing also with Atmos, with the objects and with the I'm trying to not get too super technical, but
So what you need to do. We're here. I'm learning.
Yeah, so like with Atmos, the beautiful thing about it is you can really map a 3D space to where I can say the the keyboard is right here, the actor's going to be here, I need the AI voice to be from the ceiling over here, and I can map that as a template for that room. And then I can say, as I come back to that, I can bring those settings back, and so it's identical for each scene that's in that space. And so it's a really incredible thing. And not only that, but it's also utilizing binaural, downmix, spatialized, to where these are actually the way that we would hear it if we were sitting in the room. And so that's the beautiful thing about it. And like, it just blows your mind to where like, oh, everything's possible.
We're like 15 minutes in, and my mind is blown, because it's almost like how they do for movies, storyboarding, and like, or even like set design. You're doing that for audio. Like you will never see this house, but you still have to sketch out the capsules into, like you said, placement. That is really, I don't know, that's kind of mind blowing there.
Literally, we were storyboarding. So we drew, action maps to where, and that's what I like to, like, I kind of take on the role. And of course, with this type of podcasting, it's like, we're kind of redefining the industry a little bit. A lot of us come from film. So there's a lot of roles that are kind of bended and changed a little bit. I see myself, my role when it comes to, the mix and the sound design as a director of photography for audio. So like I'm choosing the camera move. So I'm choosing like this dolly move is moving through the
This one
crowd.
right here.
It's going to
Yeah.
change. We're going to do a dirty over the shoulder. And so the idea of like that visual, so the whole goal of this is to get the team, our creative team, on the same page. And the joke is like seeing the world. Like we're all seeing it. We're all immersed in this world to where now we can say, oh no, actually, that reflection or that coffee maker should be on this side of the room, because we're all
Yeah, and
seeing.
like so it's still collaborative. And I want to say so right
Mhm.
there, like for your work on podcasts like Solar or your work with that you've worked with Wondery before, why did you decide to mix in Dolby Atmos? Was it like a collaborative thought? Did someone tell you that you should do that? Like Solar wouldn't be Solar without Adobe Atmos, so you must do it. Or did you come with that idea?
Yeah, I think Atmos was a conversation since the beginning. We were kind of trying to find our way, and there's several formats. Me specifically, I hadn't mixed with Atmos before. I was strictly in a VR, world to where using ambisonics to where it was like, and then printing those down into a stereo format. As we continued to work on Solar, we came to kind of the point to where we had to decide one way or the other, and basically we just all were like, Atmos looks like the best option and the most commercially available, so that we're not going to mix for some format that's going to be 10 years down the line. Somebody's going to be able to, but what can we use right now that's going to not only immediately have the benefit but also have the future proof into the future as we move on, that as more devices and things become available, that will be future proofing the show. And so that was the natural choice. Of course, it was in the middle of production, and we had like a week to figure it out. And so it was
Okay.
it was intense. It was intense for a couple of weeks, I think, trying to figure out this new workflow and trying to get it in. Just simply because of the deadline, like the speed of it. Now looking back, it's actually super simple. Like the idea of like what it
Yeah.
does and how it works is incredibly simple. It can be intimidating at first, but it's like the idea of like where it goes. It's all very logical.
That's kind of a
But yeah.
life gem, CJ. I'm here. We're talking about Adobe Atmos, but I also want to say that you just chatting with you a couple of times before. Sometimes you just say things that are like for life. It can look hard at first, or it can seem because it's overwhelming, but it's actually not that hard. Like the limit does not exist.
Yeah,
And
it's like lifting
so
weights.
exactly right. You're like, oh my God, so I'm never gonna get there, but it just takes time. It's like you
Yeah.
have to be familiar with it. But once you get
Mhm.
familiar with it, again, you can do anything. I'm curious, like, so if say for Solar, if Solar would have just if we wouldn't have gone for Dolby Atmos, it would have been just the stereo or just your basic thing. So how do you feel like Dolby Atmos really like enhanced it from what it could have been? Like, the lesser version, if you will.
Well, I know for sure. So a couple of the examples that the big challenges in the show, and I remember reading the script for the first time. There was these parts to where the ship would lose gravity, and so like doing, but there's no, like it's just losing gravity, and so we have
Mm.
to figure out a way. First of all, like obviously it's a little bit of a challenge to have sound in space, but we put it there. It's not necessarily super accurate, but it definitely gives you so we're walking away with an emotion of the idea of like we've lost gravity. And so what that is, when you think about losing gravity, that's a vertical motion. It's a vertical up and down. And that's very hard to do in just straight stereo. It's basically, I don't know that it's impossible, but that's always been the challenge in all the shows, has been a vertical, like when somebody falls through the floor or somebody's like floating away.
Yeah, I'm thinking
And
like a
so,
sound cue. You hear like a ooh.
yeah, yeah,
Like that's like the most you can get. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like a little
right,
whistle blow from top to bottom.
yeah.
But yeah, so keep going. Like
So we
how
were
you
able
enhance it.
to, with Atmos, to actually take that vertical motion and make that a big part of the storytelling. So now when we lose gravity, it's not just sounds that are just kind of happening. It's sounds that are going, like in like things, and then like it comes back on, and then everything goes, falls back down
Uh,
and
yeah.
hits the floor and spreads out across the floor in a spatialized way. So like the distance, the idea of like an astronaut floating to the ceiling and having to come back, not only does it go to the ceiling, but the perception is also with distance. And so that's a big way that we work too, is as things move away from us, it becomes quieter, it becomes more filtered, we lose more high frequency. And so when we do that in Atmos, it actually has, the ability to make that perceivable to the listener. And the amazing thing is it can all be printed into a stereo file, like if you go listen to Solar
Wow.
anywhere
Yeah.
right now on any of the platforms, that's all printed directly from the Atmos renderer. So like all that's printed into that information, you're walking away with the stereo file that retains that movement. So when you go listen to it, you can still perceive those movements. Not only that, but now if somebody plays it back on an actual, Atmos rig or an Atmos soundbar, they're going to get that full there. It's literally going to be coming from up there, So like that's where the vertical motion was so important, specifically for this show, but also with the storytelling in the ship atmosphere. Man, there's so many fun examples in
No,
that show. And
and
again,
the
kudos to Jenny and Chris. I know you're there, and I love you guys. And thank you for it was a long journey of just exploring, like exploring what we could do. And I think that's the walk away from, always, it's great to do a project and it's great to get something out, but it's always going to be the people, at the end of the day, what you learn together, the journey that you went on together
uh,
to create something from nothing. Those are the things that you'll tell your grandkids about, and the people that you were able to work with, and we did this thing. And so, yes, it's an amazing show, and you should definitely listen to it. But it's almost like when I walk away from it, it's like the amount that I learned from just doing it, just starting, like I didn't know what I was, like I didn't know.
yeah.
I was
Just
like,
kind of
I'm
throwing
just
it
going to
trial by
figure it
fire.
out.
You're
Yeah,
just gonna
just got to jump in, jump
uh-huh.
in and like, what's the worst, my mom, that's the best advice this is not about Atmos, but, uh, my mom said, well, if you can handle the worst case scenario, you can handle the risk. And
Come
so
on now.
I'm constantly like, okay, what's the worst case scenario? I'm gonna have to go mow lawns. Like, I'll do this,
What's the worst that could happen? A shout out to
So
Mama Drumeller. How
yeah,
just everyone.
is she
And
there? I don't know
and
if she's
I
here.
kind of right just now she's just out there. Um, you brought up kind of your team collaboration and how much it was to collaborate with each other, and now the work that you've produced is so good, which honestly I think is so important. I think the better the team, the better the project, like the better it's going to be. And so kind of now because it trickles down to the consumer. So I'm curious, like, how are you using, and this can be solar or beyond, definitely beyond solar, how are you using Dolby Atmos to place listeners in the story? Like, what do you feel like, what are your favorite things to do, or yeah, techniques?
Well, I think the start is always going to be um create a picture of like where is the listener, literally as a position. So like where almost, and it goes back to the VR mindset, like where is the user or where's the player at? Where are they walking? How close are they to this conversation? To where the beautiful thing about with object based is you can have things, so close you can have them like the monsters like whispering in your ear, or it can be across the room, and so it's like the idea of like how to place people in the story is also an evaluation of importance of like what do we really need them to pick up on. As a
Mm.
sound designer, I tend to go way too far above and beyond, like it's the monster's like, 5 stories tall and it needs to just be a normal monster, and so like the
Bring it
collaboration
down.
effort is very much back and forth as far as like having other people's perspectives and being able to do that. The beautiful thing about Atmos now, and it's always been like this, but you can actually, if you have, even like AirPod Pros or an Apple TV 4K running through an Atmos soundbar, you can send an MP4 of an Atmos mix and have that represented on those playback devices. So the
Mm.
collaboration part of it is done through like MP4s, and then you can also, with the master file as well. I think that's kind of what you were asking about.
And then yeah, just like do you specifically? I know we talked about accessibility as well, and just like that, like that's what podcast has really done. And so
Mhm.
just even more so, like, are there specifically in your mind, like for the listeners, you're just like Do you ever get hyped to be like, oh my God, I'm going to create this so like could the listeners feel it really good at this? Or, especially like I was
Yeah.
listening to Solar prior to this interview, and oh my God, how quickly I put my headphones in and I was immediately transported. I said I wasn't am I on Earth anymore. And so
Yeah.
when you're creating things like that, do you feel like you're actively doing things in Dolby Atmos for the listener?
Yeah, I think so. I think the main, the idea of, and the whole, even this goes back to even the push to podcasting. In the film world, I would be waiting for months for a film to get done to where it's like they have a story and they're working on it, and I'm waiting and waiting and waiting, and then like finally, okay, it's mix time and everything's going. So there's so much that has to do with in that storytelling. It's a big thing and it's hard to do, very expensive to do. Whereas what I wanted to do was to up my output. So like jumping into podcasting not only created a new form of storytelling to where now I can tell these stories in an immersive way, but also I can be more active in what stories we're telling. So like the idea of like placing, it even goes back to the art itself to where, what I think is good art is art that simply creates you in it invites you to be empathetic,
There it
and
is. Yes. Hmm.
good art does that, good art, you walk away and you've walked in their shoes. And so the idea of being able to do this and to not have as many roadblocks with, maybe they don't like the way that, I was going to use another Harry Potter thing, but
Oh,
like
you're
maybe
talking,
they,
I'm your audience. Just talk right to me. I'm,
right. Well, maybe
I
they
love
don't
it.
like the way like a certain character looks or something, and it's like that is a block to them because like if I go back and watch Independence Day now on the TV, it's like it's dated, like it's got now
Yeah.
I have to get over the bad CGI and all this kind of stuff. In audio, those roadblocks aren't there, so now you can actually say, you can have these sounds that will hold up till the end of time. We can go back and listen to shows from the 50s, that are still super horrifying, and like the War of the Worlds and all the things that they did. But the idea was to how can we effectively tell a story in an empathetic way? And then once you've created that craft or become good at that, then it's also you get to choose and say what stories do we need to hear as a culture, as a society. And so this idea of like it just being a podcast, or where it's like a lot of people think that podcast is one of the remaining free speech platforms or whatever, like to where you can there's not as many gatekeepers when it comes to podcasting.
Right.
And so getting a message that is that drives compassion and empathy, how can we live together, all these things that are important for our society to hear. It's all about, like we make good shows, we make good fun shows, but on the
And that's the
backside of
point.
it,
Yeah.
yeah, and on the backside of it, we're also learning the skill of being able to invite people to be empathetic. And so I know this is like philosophy probably more than anything, like to where it's
Come
like
on.
this is what drives me, like this is what I think that we can go and walk away from this and say, like the idea is not to be perfect. It's not to be, it's to tell stories and to make the voices loud that we need to hear. And if you can make them loud in Atmos to where it's like triggering neurons that are, you're in a spatially engaged environment, like how good is that? And it's super valuable and it's super easy, and it's super easy and
It's
cheap.
and that's what I
I
want to
mean,
learn
it
more
can be cheap.
about. Okay, right, can be cheap. Let's put that in
Yeah,
parentheses. It can be cheap.
right.
CJ, I want to say as we're just continuing on, I have like so many questions that I have to follow up with, but I want to tell you that you, my friend, are taking me personally to church. You have brought up Harry Potter. You have said a great affirmation, quotes. Like please keep coming with these gems. I think
All right.
if I can do one thing and take away three things, I'm excited. So all right, so
Mhm.
let's get into we're going to get a bit technical here, and so
Yep.
this is may break my brain, but I'm here for it. So how do you mix content with Dolby Atmos? That
Okay, so yeah, this is a really step one.
Let me bring
uh,
up my notepad. All right, I'm
and
ready.
I would love to get into the like I would love to that because the idea and the fun thing about this is it's still a new thing. And so you're even the people that are here right now or watching this video later on, it's still new. It's still a fresh platform where we're still identifying things that can make it better, and we're still identifying things that like, oh, maybe we should try this and new ways to do it. So there's always going to be, a new tool or a new thing that we can use, but it's also the people that are early adopters for this. And I think that's a big thing for me. It's like what's exciting is I wanted to be in the, on the forefront of technology and what we could do. And so, and it's like, the Wild, there's not as many, defined rules sometimes. It's like you can try things, you can break them, and then you can try and figure it out. So the idea of adopting Atmos early right now, and what I would consider is still early, even though it's been done, now it's more readily accessible for every home mixer. So what, just for an example, even when we start with Solar, I had stems of all the, I had dialogue stems, I had, effects and music. And basically we had to adjust the workflow to where now we're using the renderer, and we're going to start using, beds and then, objects. And so the directionality then took on a new meaning when it came to like, this person's going to walk across the room. So when you're mixing with Atmos, a lot of times it's, people think that, well, what do I need to record with? What do I need to, what kind of files can I use? And honestly, a majority of the content is all in mono. So the dialogue's all mono. It's all, a lot of the Foley is all in mono. And there can even be, stereo stuff that you can, spread out in the room. And so I typically will do, the dialogue editing to where it's like, and I mean that in a film sense, to where like I'm cleaning up the dialogue if there's any, voice, like getting it as clean as I can there. And then like a preliminary, even a stereo, sound design pass. And then basically the goal for me is to get into Atmos as soon as possible when it comes to a new session. And so like I'll have my mono tracks and some things, but as soon as I can, I'll export that into what I've created, a Dolby Atmos template, which has all the objects and all the routing and everything that I want. And then I'll immediately start activating those, objects. And I'm so sorry, I'm getting a phone call.
Not now.
Sorry, I'll call you back. So the fun thing is getting the Atmos first, because, and I said, but it's also a mindset that I think is important, because like even now we have a lot of content, like a lot of back catalog mixing. And you mentioned Wondery. I'm going to be mixing with Wondery here in November on a show called Against the Odds.
Nice.
Which is
I'm familiar with that one. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Keep going. Which is very immersive. Wondery is known for immersive too. They're getting bigger on it, but specifically that show is really cool.
Yeah, and shout out to them for being the first platform to stream Atmos natively. So if you have, you don't need any special hoops or anything. So they're one of the first. I think they are definitely with podcasting through their app. So anyways, the idea is to get into Atmos as soon as I can, because as soon as I can get those objects activated, that's when, again, we're going to start seeing the story. So I don't even have to finish sound design. As soon as I start activating objects with the voices and start moving people around, like that's where my imagination triggers and says, oh, now this would be cool to have a broken fan, in this side of the room, and just like, because your mind is just painting the picture as soon as it can. And as soon as you can activate, a binaural setting or a binaural listen through to where like you're in the room, it makes the storytelling and the sound design so much easier.
And following your process too, I loved how you brought up dialogue editing, and then from dialogue editing, is that typical? Like we move from dialogue editing and then into sound design just at your base level, and then we come into Dolby Atmos, like, and you have your template set up?
I do. Yeah, okay. I love doing it that way, just because now there's different teams that have, more people. I like to have a very small, potent team to where, I'll end up doing the dialogue and the sound design and the mixing. And the mastering or whatever else, and then usually
a freelancer,
with whatever it takes. And then Chris Porter wrote the music for Solar, which is and Jenny was the AI Allie in there. So anytime you hear which is one of I don't know. Every time I listen to it, it's such a strong performance. So anyways, the question was, the process is, the reason that I start with dialogue is that same thing, the familiarity with the story. So I want to hear the nuances in the dialogue over and over and over and over and over again before I start sound designing. Because as soon as I put a sound in, as soon as I put a drip of water in, my brain's thinking drip of water. So I'm trying to preserve that purity. Mm-hmm. And to really come to terms with what did the directors and the writers want to do with the story, and to maintain that as long as I can. And as soon as I start throwing sounds at it, it's, paint on the wall. I mean, it's like, what's going to stick? It's like a million sounds. what do you guys like? And so
I love
so
that.
so it is that familiarity. And I think the important thing is in these stories is identifying the person that's the most immersed. And obviously starting out, it's the writer. Like they see this world unlike anybody else, and it's their job through the writing to spread that vision to the directors, and then the directors spread that vision to the actors, and the actor and those acting performances spreads that vision to the editor, and then the editor sends it to me, and I'm like, gets it to where it's like, okay, now we're trying to all come on the same page of where we're seeing the story. Now there'll be new introductions to like things that are special to each person. And that's what a great team does. They bring their
Exactly.
speciality or the thing that they're uniquely good at, to
Hmm.
the story. And so like sometimes I'm like, well, what if they were saying it from second floor, or something like, something stupid. And they're like, no, CJ, it's okay. Like, we'll just keep it the way it was. But we tried,
But
and
thanks for offering. I want to say that
yeah,
once again, CJ, you are dropping gems. The process that you described from the writer to the editor is literally and probably beyond podcasting, right? It's just a part of
sure.
production. Like this feels the next one. I wanted to just to keep us. I know that we can't, stay everywhere for too long, but I do want to ask specifically you, what DAW do you use, and do I need a DAW to use Dolby Atmos?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, yes, the idea of, using a DAW with these features is why not? Like you're definitely going to want one. I use Pro Tools mainly for all my Atmos stuff. I know that for me, that's just the idea of collaboration. I think is the main thing that ties me to that. Is because you typically people are in a Pro Tools format, not exclusively. And the fun thing is too. And I think that you even mentioned it too, like with the accessibility of Atmos even on other DAWs too.
And that's what, so, and like, which is good. So it's good to know that, yes, if I did have Pro Tools, it definitely works with Dolby Atmos, of course. But I mean, I can just start with, I don't need it. I don't have to have a DAW. But
Hmm.
also, if I had like Logic Pro, Steinberg, all those other things, Dolby Pro goes with it. I'm sorry, not
Yep,
Dolby Pro, now I'm mixing Dolby Atmos. Cool, cool, cool. Make sure there. All right, let's see. I got like my list of questions. I feel strapped for time, so I want to like get it all out. All right,
sure.
so another question I want to ask you though. Do you need any special equipment to record before bringing projects into the mix room in order to mix them in Dolby Atmos?
Yeah, so here's a fun thing. Now, I actually read this question earlier, and my response was, "What would Kurt do?" And when I say Kurt, I mean like Kurt Cobain. Like, what would Kurt do if he was doing an Atmos?
Ah,
And so, like, that's kind of my mindset. I think I've kind of got this thing to where it's always been ear before gear for me. Like, it's always been the amount that you're training your ear is always going to trump any kind of, not to, I don't know why I said that, is always going to be better than having the best gear is the amount that you
mm,
apply your ear training. So for me, when we decided to go into Atmos, it was immediate. Like we had to do it fast. And so I didn't have a chance to build a studio. And I wasn't about to do that because I was already strapped, like I'm strapped for time. And so we dove in. And the beautiful thing about with Atmos and the way that it works is you're doing a full Atmos mix and full spatial sound or object based, mixing. And there's actually down mixing and encoding that you can hear a binaural representation of what you're doing in headphones. So like it's super easy to jump in and just immediately say, hey, I need to hear this on how people are going to hear it on headphones.
mm.
And that's how
Would
we
you?
started. That's how we started with solar as far as, and until recently, until I had a chance to rebuild my studio to where it's like I have, more room for the speakers and stuff. So a full mix, like all the initial mixing that happened on solar was done with headphones, which
Okay.
is which is wild. And people will be like, what? But it's true. And so now when I come back into, Pro Tools or into my studio now and listen to it spatially, I can recognize, I'm like, oh, this is what we were doing, like, and this is where, and I think that the main thing, the key with that is, it is good. And this is where the team comes in, or this is where the community comes in,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
somebody that or just make some friends, meet somebody that has a studio that has Atmos. I've got one. If you want to send me stuff, but have somebody QC it on, on the speakers. because
There we go. Check.
as
Writing it on my
as
list. QC through the
yeah,
speakers, right? Okay.
yeah,
QC
just
through the
because
speakers.
it's definitely an easier, just to identify. I would say that 80-90% of my stuff translated great on the speakers. There's some things where I'm like, oh, if I would have started with speakers, I might have adjusted things a little more to the middle. But at this point, but like for the delivery of that podcast, it was perfect. It was great.
Mm, I love that. Now, the stickiness of podcasts, like how do you see Dolby Atmos as a huge differentiator for podcasts specifically?
Sorry, repeat that question one more time.
How do you see Dolby Atmos as a huge differentiator for a specific podcast? Because I've been seeing, for me personally, I'm a music head. I love
Mm.
music. And then sometimes on some songs, I've been seeing lossless, and then some songs say Dolby Atmos. And
Yeah.
so, do you feel specifically for podcasts that they have the best advantage because it's such an immersive thing? Or, what's better, podcast or music? I guess
Well,
that's
I think
where
there's a definite unique opportunity with immersive audio when it comes to podcasting and storytelling. Not only for, scripted dial or scripted podcasting, but also for, nonfiction or even interview shows, the thing we were talking about earlier, to whereas as soon as, you enter that space, your brain activates in a different way. And what's cool about, podcasting is we can really push the boundaries, even as opposed to film, to where like we kind of need to keep it in the frame. With podcasting, like there's things that I couldn't do in film that I'm doing, and the amount of options that becomes available through object oriented mixing and panning and all this kind of stuff, it's incredible. So I think it's like really, like obviously adopting Atmos now is something that I think everyone should do. And then the storytelling, that can happen through this type of thing is just a new brand, even for an interview show. If we were interviewing, and that's why, you think about a Zoom call, like what's better about, meeting in person than it is in Zoom. It's not only that you get to see face to face and you're in the same room, but it's also your hearing is different because we're not hearing all the voices coming straight to our head.
no,
Like we can
they're
hear,
placed. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and so
Mm-hmm.
our brain is activated and we retain more information through that immersive, obviously immersive experience.
Now we're gonna get you a
But
T-shirt. It's gonna say immersive. It's fine. It's already been
yeah,
ordered.
yeah,
Uh,
immersive.
I do. Okay, so I want to like first of all, I know we're nearing time, so I don't want to take too much more of your time and everyone else's. But so one, thank you for such a great discussion so far. Thank you for keeping it at high level. I feel like we could probably talk for hours to really do a good deep dive.
Yeah.
So before we part, and have started any wrap up stuff, are there any recommendations that you have for podcast creators who are just starting to experience, Dolby Atmos, getting experiment with it?
Yeah, I think it's really about, the internal, decision just to be on the cutting edge and to jump into it if the tools are available. And if you are at this meeting, I know that you get 90 days free of the production suite, or if you're using one of the ones that just have it built in, it's a matter of, diving in and just understanding that it's more about what you learn from the project, I think, than it is from being perfect from the start. And it's always going to have this learning curve of like you'll get comfortable with it. But I think the more that people ask for this type of content, the earlier that we can get our hands wet, whether it's, your interview show to where maybe you just have a nice background, or whether it's a full on immersive show, to really push the boundaries, and also, utilizing your team of people that are more like, okay, that's good, but like let's keep it about, you know, let's keep
No.
it real,
I talk about
So
the importance of community one more time. Just like,
yeah,
I think let ego go. Don't keep everything to yourself. Share your work, have it reviewed, have a team. Exactly
yep.
what you're saying. Love that.
Yeah, and if you're looking for people that are, like people are want this to succeed, because there's nothing. I mean, it's more fun than anything, to be able to work in this. But like people want you to succeed. The Dolby Atmos team have been phenomenal. I mean, they're incredible. Like reach out and like if you need somebody to QC something on speakers, like send me a DM or
Shout
whatever.
out
Like
to
I'd love to hear it.
And really, with that being said, a huge thank you to the Dolby team for allowing this conversation to happen. I just want to say to everyone out there listening, as CJ has already kind of mentioned, Yeah, we have free learning materials that are available online through the Dolby Institute and Dolby Professional Support. And so everyone attending now is going to get a session where they get free 90-day free trial to Dolby Atmos Renderer. And so just a few things, just to plug, make sure to visit professional.dolby.com/podcast. One more time, it's professional.dolby.com/podcast for more information. You can sign up for the Dolby XP app to listen to examples of podcasts in Dolby Atmos, including Kurt Cole's Solar. So, so
Yeah.
good, by the way. And so before we go, CJ, if people want to reach out to you or just your greater team, what is the best way to reach out to you?
Just reach out to me on Instagram is probably the best way, and you can kind of see some workflow, fun things. But you can send me a DM on there. It's just at CJ_sound. So it's CEEJR _. That's what my friends call me. _sounds.
Seizure. I like that.
Seizures. So that's where another thing, and then also also you can listen to Solar anywhere. It's available now. I think solarthepodcast.com/listen. You can listen to it on whatever favorite thing it is. I got a new show coming out called Corvallo. It's going to be an Atmos first supernatural thriller. So hopefully we'll be able to come back and talk about that sometime too.
Thank you for the work that you do. I'm a big fan of sound designers, so I've just been like giddy the entire call. And just one more time from my team, I'm with Pod People. Again, if there are any freelancers out there, we have jobs. We can connect you with staffing services. We have a community. We have a million things that we can help out with in your freelance journey, from editors, sound designers, writers, all those things. So if you have interest in checking out Pod People, just go to podpeople.com/join, and it'll be just a bunch of information. And if you want to send any emails to learn more about the community, you can email community@podpeople.com. So definitely check us out. And then CJ, I just want to say thank you for a wonderful cup of coffee with you, my friend. This
Yeah.
has been so good. I think I'm gonna like binge episodes of Solar probably this weekend after just being so exposed to its greatness. So thank you again.
Nice. Thank you. This
Awesome.
is awesome.
Thank you, everybody. And from my team here, just let us know if you need anything. And we are good. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye.